Hello everyone, wishing you all a wonderful day. Today we're diving into an emotional new chapter as the CEO returns to the village and finds another man growing close to Tieu Lac and his daughter. Jealousy explodes, but Tieu Lac hits him with one painful question. You don't even remember loving me, so what right do you have to be jealous? And when their daughter asks if another man can stay with them if Papa never returns, will the CEO finally understand what he's about to lose? If you enjoy the story, don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss the next episode. The CEO returned to the village just before sunset. The drive had felt longer than usual. All afternoon, his mind had been filled with too many things at once. The mysterious photograph, his mother secretly meeting the senior board member, the missing technician, the anonymous warnings. And somewhere beneath all of that, Tieu Lac. He told himself he was only returning because he needed to make sure she and their daughter were safe. That was the logical reason, the responsible reason. But the moment his car turned onto the narrow village road, he knew that wasn't the whole truth. He had missed them, especially after what happened the last time he was there. Tieu Lac had been jealous. She had tried to hide it. He had teased her. For one brief moment, the distance between them had disappeared. And somehow, that small moment had stayed with him far longer than it should have. The CEO slowed the car as he approached the house. Then his expression changed. Someone was standing in the yard. A man. The same young man from the village. He was repairing part of the wooden fence. Tieu Lac stood nearby, holding several pieces of wood. Their daughter was running around them, laughing. The CEO's hands tightened around the steering wheel. He didn't know why. The young man said something. Tieu Lac laughed. Not a polite smile, a real laugh. The CEO felt something hot rise in his chest. Then their daughter ran toward the young man and grabbed his hand. "Come." He let her pull him across the yard. The CEO stopped the car. For several seconds, he didn't get out. He simply watched. The little girl picked up a ball and threw it. The young man caught it dramatically, pretending the impact nearly knocked him over. She burst out laughing. Tieu Lac laughed too. Something inside the CEO twisted. "This is ridiculous," he whispered. He had no right to be angry. He knew that. Tieu Lac wasn't his wife, not anymore. He didn't even remember their relationship completely. He had spent weeks telling her that he needed time to understand the past. And now he was sitting inside a car, feeling furious because another man had made her laugh. The CEO opened the door. The sound immediately caught their attention. His daughter turned first. "Papa!" The anger disappeared from his face instantly. She ran toward him. The CEO crouched and caught her in his arms. "Hey, you came back." "I did." She wrapped both arms around his neck. The CEO held her tightly. Then he looked over her shoulder. Tieu Lac was watching him. The young man stood beside her. The CEO's jaw tightened again. Tieu Lac noticed. Of course she noticed. She always seemed to notice the things he tried hardest to hide. The CEO stood. "You're still here?" The young man looked amused. "Apparently." Tieu Lac immediately frowned. "What does that mean?" "Nothing." The CEO looked at the broken fence. "Still fixing this?" The young man glanced at the fence. "It broke again." "You repaired it badly last time." Tieu Lac crossed her arms. "He didn't repair this section last time." The CEO looked at her. "I wasn't asking you." "Then don't make stupid comments." Their daughter looked between them. The young man smiled awkwardly. "I can finish later." "No." Tieu Lac immediately stopped him. "You already started. Finish it." The CEO stared at her. She knew exactly what she was doing. Or maybe she didn't. That somehow irritated him even more. Their daughter tugged his sleeve. "Papa, play with us." The CEO looked down. "What were you playing?" "Ball." She pointed toward the young man. "He's bad." The young man laughed. "I'm standing right here." The little girl whispered loudly, "Papa is better." That made the CEO feel far too satisfied. Tieu Lac saw the expression on his face. Don't look so proud. I'm not. You are. He picked up the ball. Maybe I am. For the next few minutes, he played with his daughter, but every time the young man spoke to Tieu Lac, the CEO's attention shifted. Every time Tieu Lac smiled, his grip on the ball tightened. Finally, the young man walked toward the house to get another tool. The CEO immediately approached Tieu Lac. Does he come here often? She looked at him. Who? He gave her a look. You know who? Tieu Lac picked up another piece of wood. Sometimes. Sometimes? Yes. How often is sometimes? She stopped, then slowly turned toward him. Why? No reason. Tieu Lac stared at him for several seconds, then she smiled. Not warmly, almost knowingly. Are you jealous? The CEO nearly laughed. No. Good. She returned to her work. The CEO stayed where he was. Then, against his better judgment, he said, I just think he's around a lot. Tieu Lac sighed. He lives in the village. That's convenient. Her eyes narrowed. What exactly is your problem? I don't have a problem. You've been here 10 minutes and you've questioned why he's fixing my fence, how often he visits, and why he's playing with our daughter. The CEO lowered his voice. Our daughter? Tieu Lac's expression changed. Yes. He looked toward the little girl. I don't want some other man getting too close to her. Tieu Lac stared at him. And what does too close mean? He didn't answer. He's known her for years. I haven't. The words came out before he could stop them. Tieu Lac froze. The CEO realized what he had said. Something painful passed through her face. You haven't, she said quietly. He immediately regretted it. Tieu Lac, no. She put the wood down. You're right. Her voice became colder. You don't remember most of her childhood. The CEO's expression tightened. But that doesn't give you the right to suddenly appear and decide who is allowed in our lives. I didn't say that. You didn't have to. She stepped closer. You come back whenever you want. You leave whenever the investigation pulls you away. And every time you return, you act like everything here has been waiting exactly where you left it. The CEO couldn't respond, because part of him had expected exactly that. Tieu Lac, his daughter, the house, the blue cup, his place at the table. He had expected them all to remain untouched while he searched for answers. Tieu Lac looked directly into his eyes. Then she asked the question that stopped him completely. You don't even remember loving me. His jaw tightened. So tell me. She paused. What right do you have to be jealous? The CEO opened his mouth. Nothing came out. He wanted to say that he felt something every time he looked at her, that seeing another man beside her made him angry in a way he couldn't explain, that even without the memories, some part of him still reacted as though Tieu Lac belonged at the center of his life. But wasn't that exactly the problem? He didn't know whether those feelings were love, memory, guilt, possession, or fear. Tieu Lac waited. When he still couldn't answer, she gave a bitter smile. Exactly. She walked past him. The CEO stood alone in the yard. For once, there was no argument he could win, no evidence he could investigate, no missing record he could recover. She had asked him something only his heart could answer, and his heart was the one thing he trusted least. That evening, they ate dinner together. The young man stayed because Tieu Lac's mother had invited him. The CEO said almost nothing. Their daughter sat between the adults, happily telling stories. Then suddenly, she looked toward the young man. Can I ask you something? He smiled. Of course. Tieu Lac kept eating. The CEO barely looked up. Then the little girl asked, if Papa doesn't come back anymore? Every adult at the table froze. She continued innocently. Can you stay with Mama and me? The CEO's spoon stopped halfway to the table. Tieu Lac's face went pale. The young man didn't know what to say. And the CEO slowly looked at his daughter. For the first time since losing his memory, jealousy was no longer something he could pretend not to understand. Because the idea of another man taking his place didn't just make him angry, it terrified him. The little girl's question hung over the dinner table. If Papa doesn't come back anymore, can you stay with Mama and me? Nobody moved. The young man looked at Tieu Lac. Tieu Lac looked at her daughter. The CEO stared at the plate in front of him as if the room had suddenly become too small. For a few seconds, even the child realized something was wrong. She looked around innocently. What? Tieu Lac immediately reached for her hand. Sweetheart, don't ask things like that. Why? Because... Tieu Lac hesitated. The young man spoke first. Because your papa is here. The little girl looked toward the CEO. But sometimes Papa leaves. The words hit him harder than anything else that evening. He slowly put down his spoon. I'm here now. The girl nodded. But you might go again. The CEO opened his mouth, then stopped. He remembered Tieu Lac's rule. Don't make promises you can't keep. So instead of saying he would never leave again, he asked, does that make you scared? The little girl looked down. A little. The CEO's chest tightened. Tieu Lac immediately looked away. The young man stayed silent. The CEO leaned closer to his daughter. Then Papa needs to do better. She looked up. Better at what? At making sure you know when I'm leaving. And when you're coming back. The CEO nodded. If I know, I'll tell you. The girl thought about that. Then she smiled slightly. Okay. The tension eased just enough for everyone to breathe again. But the CEO couldn't forget what she had asked. Another man staying with Tieu Lac and their daughter. Another man sitting at his place. Another man being there every day while he remained trapped between the city and the past. The thought made something ugly rise inside him. He hated that feeling. After dinner, the young man helped clear the table. The CEO watched him carry dishes into the kitchen. You don't have to do that. The young man glanced over. I know. The CEO's jaw tightened. Tieu Lac heard them. Can both of you stop? We're not doing anything. Exactly. You're both doing that thing men do, where you pretend you're not competing. The young man laughed. The CEO didn't. That made Tieu Lac even more annoyed. A few minutes later, the young man prepared to leave. Before stepping outside, he crouched beside the little girl. I'll see you another day. She hugged him. Tomorrow? He looked toward Tieu Lac. Maybe. The CEO's expression immediately darkened. The young man noticed. This time, he didn't ignore it. He walked outside. The CEO followed. Tieu Lac sighed. Of course. Outside, the young man turned. If you want to say something, say it. The CEO crossed his arms. You've been around them a lot. Yes. Why? Because they're my friends. Is that all? The young man smiled. There it is. What? The question you actually wanted to ask. The CEO didn't deny it. Do you want Tieu Lac? The young man looked toward the house, then back at him. I care about her. That answer was not what the CEO wanted. How much? The young man laughed softly. You really are jealous. The CEO's face hardened. I'm asking a simple question. No, you're not. The young man's expression became more serious. You're asking because you're afraid. The CEO didn't respond. You're afraid that if you keep leaving, someone else will eventually stay. The words landed exactly where they were meant to. The CEO looked away. The young man continued. I know what you think when you see me with them. You don't know anything about what I think. I know enough. He pointed toward the house. Tieu Lac has been raising that little girl while trying to survive everything your family brought into her life. The CEO's anger cooled. If you want a place here, you don't get it because you're the father. The CEO looked at him sharply. You earn it. That sentence hurt, mostly because it was true. The young man stepped closer. And if you're asking whether I'd take your place, he paused. I don't want your place. The CEO waited. But if one day Tieu Lac decides she doesn't want to wait for you anymore, that's her choice. The CEO's jaw tightened. Not yours? No. The young man nodded. Not yours either. Then he walked away. The CEO remained outside long after he disappeared. When he finally returned inside, Tieu Lac was washing dishes. Their daughter had gone to bed. He stood near the kitchen doorway. Was he right? Tieu Lac didn't turn around. About what? That you might stop waiting. Her hands paused in the water. I never said I was waiting. The CEO almost smiled bitterly. Right. She dried her hands. What do you want me to say? I don't know. That's becoming a pattern. He deserved that. The CEO looked at the old blue cup sitting beside the sink. I hated seeing him here. Tieu Lac's expression changed. He continued before she could interrupt. I hated watching him play with her. Tieu Lac, I hated watching you laugh with him. Now she was silent. The CEO looked directly at her, and I don't know why. Tieu Lac gave him a tired look. Yes, you do. No. You just don't like the answer. He frowned. What answer? That maybe your heart remembers things your mind doesn't. The CEO went still. Tieu Lac regretted the sentence immediately. She turned away. But he stepped closer. Do you believe that? I don't know. You just said it. I said maybe. For a moment, neither spoke. Then the CEO asked quietly, Do you want him? Tieu Lac looked at him. Would it matter? Yes. Why? He struggled. That same question again. Why? Because he was her daughter's father. Because they shared a past. Because every time she looked at another man, something inside him twisted. None of those answers felt complete. Finally, he said, Because I don't want to lose something before I even remember having it. Tieu Lac's anger disappeared. For a second, pain replaced it. You already lost it. The CEO froze. She continued, That's what you don't understand. Her voice was softer now. You keep acting like our relationship is waiting for you to remember it. Tieu Lac looked directly at him. It isn't. The CEO said nothing. What we had is gone. That sentence hurt more than he expected. If there is ever going to be something between us again, she paused. It has to be new. The CEO slowly nodded. Not because he liked it, because he understood. He couldn't recover Tieu Lac like a missing file. He couldn't simply remember loving her and expect everything to return. He would have to make her trust him again. He would have to choose her again. And this time, he would have to do it while fully knowing what that choice meant. Before he could say anything, his phone vibrated. A message from his trusted employee in the city. The CEO opened it. His expression changed immediately. Tieu Lac noticed. What happened? He read the message again. We found the missing technician. He came back. He says he wants to talk, but only if you come alone. The CEO felt his stomach tighten. There was a second message. He says the problem wasn't the brakes. The CEO's eyes narrowed. Then a third message arrived. He says someone changed the vehicle after he finished inspecting it. Tieu Lac stepped closer. What does that mean? The CEO slowly looked at her. It means someone touched my car after the technician did. Her face went pale. Who? Before he could answer, another message appeared. A photograph. Blurry, taken from a distance. It showed the company garage the night before the accident. Beside the CEO's car stood a man, the same senior board member they had seen before. But this time he wasn't alone. Someone stood beside him, a woman. The CEO zoomed in, then froze. Tieu Lac watched his face. Who is it? He looked at her. It's my mother. Silence. The CEO stared at the screen. His jealousy from earlier suddenly felt childish. Because while he had been worrying about another man taking his place beside Tieu Lac, the truth about his accident was getting closer. And the next answer might force him to decide whether his mother had been trying to save him, or whether she had been part of the reason he almost died. The CEO returns to the village and is shocked to find another man helping Tieu Lac and spending time with his daughter. Although he cannot fully remember loving Tieu Lac, jealousy overwhelms him when he sees how naturally the man fits into their lives. Tieu Lac confronts him with a painful truth, asking what right he has to be jealous when he does not even remember their love. The tension deepens when their daughter innocently asks whether the village man can stay with them if Papa never comes back. The question terrifies the CEO and forces him to realize he could truly lose his place in the family. Later, he admits that his heart may remember what his mind has forgotten. But before they can grow closer, a new clue appears, suggesting someone altered his car before the accident, and his mother may know more.